Good evening, ghosts, ghouls, and things that go bump in the night. I hope you all enjoyed the Edgar Allan Poe story that we shared here on the Haunted Horrorstorian a couple weeks ago. I got a lot of positive feedback from it. I'm happy you guys liked it. On the flip side, I did also hear a lot of, but wait, where's H.P. Lovecraft? Where's my Eldritch Horror? I hear you guys too. And let me tell you, here at the Haunted Horrorstorian, we like all kinds of classic and brand new horror stories. So, we're going to do something just slightly different for the next few weeks and do a multi-part story by H.P. Lovecraft. So, sit back, relax, and tune in for The Lurking Fear by H.P. Lovecraft. Part 1. The Shadow on the Chimney. There was thunder in the air on the night I went to the deserted mansion atop Tempest Mountain to find the Lurking Fear. I was not alone, for foolhardiness was not then mixed with that love of the grotesque and the terrible which has made my career a series of quests for strange horrors in literature and in life. With me were two faithful and muscular men for whom I had sent when the time came, men long associated with me in my ghastly explorations because of their peculiar fitness. We had started quietly from the village because of the reporters who still lingered about after the Eldritch panic of a month before, the nightmare-creeping death. Later, I thought, they might have aided me, but I did not want them then. Would to God I had let them share the search, that I might not have had to bear the secret alone. So long, to bear it alone for fear the world would call me mad, or go mad itself at the demon implications of the thing. Now that I am telling it anyway, lest the brooding make me a maniac, I wish I had never concealed it. For I, and only I, know what manner of fear lurked on that spectral and desolate mountain. In a small motor car, we covered the miles of primeval forest and hill until the wooded ascent checked it. The country bore an aspect more than usually sinister as we viewed it by night and without the accustomed crowds of investigators, so that we were often tempted to use the headlights despite the attention it might attract. It was not a wholesome landscape after dark, and I believe I would have noticed its morbidity even if I had been ignorant of the terror that stalked there. Of wild creatures there were none. They were wise when death leers close. The ancient lightning-scarred trees seemed unnaturally large and twisted, and the other vegetation unnaturally thick and feverish, while curious mounds and hummocks in the weedy, fulgurite pitted earth reminded me of snakes, and dead men's skulls swelled to gigantic proportions. Fear had lurked on Tempest Mountain for more than a century. This I learned at once from newspaper accounts of the catastrophe, which first brought the region to the world's notice. The place is a remote, lonely elevation in that part of the Catskills where Dutch civilizations once feebly and transiently penetrated, leaving behind as it receded only a few mined mansions and a degenerate squatter population inhibiting pitiful hamlets on isolated slopes. Normal beings seldom visited the locality till the state police were formed, and even now only infrequent troopers patrol it. The fear, however, is an old tradition throughout the neighboring villages, since it is a prime topic on the simple discourse of the people who sometimes leave their valleys to trade hand-woven baskets for such primitive necessities as they cannot shoot, raise, or make. The lurking fear dwelt in the shunned and deserted Martens mansion, which crowned the high but gradual eminence whose liability to frequent thunderstorms gave it the name of Tempest Mountain. For over 100 years, the antique, grove-circled stone house had been the subject of stories incredibly wild and monstrously hideous. Stories of a silent, colossal, creeping death which stalked abroad in summer. With whispering incessant, the squatters told tales of a demon which seized lone wayfarers after dark, either carrying them off or leaving them in a frightful state of gnawed dismemberment, and sometimes they whispered of blood trails towards the distant mansion. Some said the thunder called the lurking fear out of its habitation, while others said the thunder was its voice. No one outside the backwoods had believed in those varying and conflicting stories, with their incoherent, extravagant descriptions of the hall-glimpsed fiend. Yet not a farmer or villager doubted that the Martens mansion was ghoulishly haunted. Local history forbade such a doubt, though no ghastly evidence was ever found by such investigators as had visited the building after some especially vivid tale from the squatters. Grandmothers told strange myths of the Martens specter, myths concerning the Martens family itself, its strange hereditary dissimilarity of eyes, its long unnatural annals, and the murder which had cursed it. The terror which brought me to the scene was a sudden and portentous confirmation of the mountaineers' wildest legends. One summer night, after a thunderstorm of unprecedented violence, the countryside was aroused by a stampede which no mere delusion could create. The pitiful throngs of people shrieked and whined of the unnameable horror which had descended upon them, and they were not doubted. They had not seen it, but they had heard such cries from one of their hamlets that they knew a creeping death had come. In the morning, citizens and state troopers followed the shuddering mountaineers to the place where they had said death had come. Death was indeed there. The ground under one of the villages had caved in after a lightning stroke, destroying several of the malodorous shanties. But upon this property damage was superimposed an organic devastation which paled it to insignificance. Of a possible 75 peoples who had inhabited the spot, not one living specimen was visible. The disordered earth was covered with blood and human debris, bespeaking too vividly the ravages of demon teeth and talons, yet no visible trail led away from the carnage. That some hideous animal must be the cause, everyone quickly agreed, nor did any tongue now revive the charge that such cryptic deaths formed merely the sordid murders common in decadent communities. That charge was revived only when about 25 of the estimated population were found missing from the dead, and even then it was hard to explain the murder of 50 by half that number. But the fact remained that on a summer night, a bolt had come out of the heavens and left a dead village whose corpses were horribly mangled, chewed, and clawed. The excited countryside immediately connected the horror with the haunted Martens mansion, though the localities were over 3 miles apart. The troopers were more skeptical, including a mansion only casually in their investigations, and dropping it altogether when they found it thoroughly deserted. Country and village people, however, canvassed the place with infinite care, overturning everything in the house, sounding ponds and brooks, beating down bushes, and ransacking the nearby forests. All was in vain. The death that had come had left no trace save the destruction itself. By the second day of the search, the affair was fully treated by the newspapers, whose reporters overran Tempest Mountain. They described it in much detail and with many interviews to elucidate the horror's history as told by local grandmas. I followed the accounts languidly at first, for I am a connoisseur in horrors, but after a week I detected an atmosphere which stirred me oddly, so that on August 5th, 1921, I registered among the reporters who crowded the Lefferts Corners, nearest village to Tempest Mountain, and acknowledged headquarters of the searchers. 3 weeks more, and the dispersal of the reporters left me free to begin a terrible exploration based on the minute inquiries and surveilling with which I had meanwhile busied myself. So, on this summer night, while distant thunder rumbled, I left a silent motor car and trapezed with 2 armed companions to the last mound-covered reaches of Tempest Mountain, casting the beams of an electric torch on the spectral gray walls that began to appear through giant oaks ahead. On this morbid night, solitude and feeble shifting illumination, the vast box-like pile displayed obscure hints of terror which day I could not uncover, yet I did not hesitate, since I had come with fierce resolution to test an idea. I believe that the thunder called to death demon out of some fearful secret place, and that demon, solid entity or vaporous pestilence, I meant to see it. I had thoroughly searched the ruin before, hence knew my plan well, choosing as the seat of my vigil an old room of Jan Martens, whose murder looms so great in the rural legends. I felt subtly that the apartment of this ancient victim was best for my purposes. The chamber, measuring about 20 feet square, contained, like the other rooms, some rubbish which had once been furniture. It lay on the second story in the southeast corner of the house and had an immense east window and narrow south window, both devoid of panes or shutters. Opposite the large window was an enormous Dutch fireplace with scriptural tiles representing the prodigal son, and opposite the narrow window was a spacious bed built into the wall. As the tree-muffled thunder grew louder, I arranged my plan's details. First, I fastened side by side to a ledge of the large window 3 rope ladders which I had brought with me. I knew they reached a suitable spot on the grass outside, for I had tested them. Then the 3 of us dragged from another room a wide 4-poster bed, crowding it laterally against the window. Having strewn it with fir boughs, all now rested on it with drawn automatics, 2 relaxing while the 3rd watched. From whatever direction the demon might come, our potential escape was provided. If it came from within the house, we had the window ladders. If from outside, the doors and the stairs. We did not think, judging from precedent, that it would pursue us far even at worst. I watched from midnight till 1 o'clock, when, in spite of the sinister house, the unprotected 2 companions, George Bennett being towards the window and William Toby towards the fireplace. Bennett was asleep, having apparently felt the same drowsiness which affected me. So I designated Toby for the next watch, even though he was nodding. It is curious how intently I had been watching the fireplace. The increasing thunder must have afflicted my dreams, for in the brief time I slept, there came to me apocalyptic visions. Once I partially awakened, because of the sleeper towards the window had restlessly flung an arm across my chest. I was not sufficiently awake to see whether Toby was attending to his duties as sentinel, but I felt a distinct anxiety on that score. Never before had the presence of evil so poignantly oppressed me. Later, I must have dropped asleep again, for it was out of a phantasmal chaos that my mind leapt when the night grew hideous with shrieks, beyond anything in my former experience or imagination. In that shrieking, the inmost soul of human fear and agony clawed helplessly and insanely at the ebony gates of oblivion. I awoke to red madness and the mockery of diabolism, as farther and farther down inconceivable vistas that phobic and crystalline anguish retreated and reverberated. There was no light, but I knew from the empty space at my right that Toby was gone. God knew whither. Across my chest still lay the heavy arm of a sleeper to my left. Then came the devastating stroke of lightning which shook the whole mountain in the darkest crypts of the hoary grove and splintered the patriarch of the twisted trees. In the demon flash of a monstrous fireball, the sleeper startled up suddenly, while the glare from beyond the window threw his shadow vividly upon the chimney above the fireplace from which my eyes never strayed. That I am still alive and sane is a marvel I cannot fathom. I cannot fathom it, for the shadow on that chimney was not that of George Bennett or of any other human creature, but a blasphemous abnormality of hell's nethermost craters, a nameless, shapeless abomination which no mind could fully grasp and no pen even partially describe. In another second, I was alone in the accursed mansion, shivering and gibbering. George Bennett and William Toby had left no trace, not even of a struggle. They were never heard of again. That, listeners, is part 1 of The Lurking Fear by H.P. Lovecraft. Do you want to hear the rest of the story? Please, tune in next time to hear part 2. Until then, if you have a story to tell, or even just an opinion of what kind of story you want to hear next time on the Haunted Horrorstorian, shoot me an email at hauntedhorrorstorian@gmail.com or find me on Facebook at Haunted Horrorstorian Podcast. Until next time, my lovely listeners, stay spooky, and remember, sometimes it's more than just a story.